Before we get started, please go over to Amazon.com and grab a copy of my book, Education and Justice. If you have an African-American son in public school, you need this book because I teach you the many ways that public schools mistreat African-American boys and what you can do to help your son. So go over there and get your copy immediately. All right, let's talk a little more about one of the most dangerous legal decisions we've seen in a long time. It is the Trump v. CASA birthright citizenship case. I've done 3 videos on it already, but this case is really big, really big. And Donald Trump is already using it to try to swing the 2026 midterms in his favor. So I got the documents and the filings, and I'm going to show you exactly what's going on. But first, I'm going to take you back to something that I said in one of my previous videos about this Trump v. CASA birthright citizenship or universal injunction case. All right, you got to hear this because I want you to see that I already issued the warning that this was coming. Here's the clip. This is not just about immigrants. This is not just about Latino immigrants. This case went far beyond immigration. It basically, at this point, jeopardizes all of our rights, all of them. So this is not fear-mongering. I'm telling you where we are. She said, no right is safe in the new legal regime the court creates. That also includes civil rights. The Civil Rights Act of 64, the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act. None of it, she says, is safe with what SCOTUS has given the Trump administration. All right. So you just saw it. Okay? And you heard it. I told you that this is not just about immigration. It wasn't just about Latinos and deportations. It's about a whole lot more. All right, so with that said, let's get into this video. So, on June 27th, 2025, the United States Supreme Court issued this case. And yes, at first glance, it looked like it was just an immigration case, a birthright citizenship case, but no, it's much more. Because the court ruled that lower district courts cannot block Trump across the whole country unless there is a certified class action lawsuit. And I've warned you many times that those are hard to get, especially if you're in a district with Trump-appointed judges. That means one judge cannot stop a bad, unlawful executive order that Trump has issued. That one judge cannot stop it, not nationwide, even if it's unlawful. And like I said, this doesn't just apply to immigration. This ruling jeopardizes all of our rights, as Justice Sotomayor said in her dissenting opinion. So, civil rights, voting rights, Fair Housing Act, all of it is on the line because she said, along with Justice Jackson, that none of our rights are protected under this decision. They're all on the line. So now let me show you how Trump is trying to use it just a few days after it has been handed down. So on March 25th, 2025, Trump issued an executive order. It's called the Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections. Let me bring it up on the screen. Here it is. And one key part of this executive order is that it requires people to show documentary proof of citizenship to register to vote, pursuant to a federal reform that he's trying to get through this executive order, trying to get it changed. Now, that might sound small. All right. You may say, what is the big deal with having to prove that you are a citizen to vote. I understand. You may think that way, and you may say this really has nothing to do with American citizens. It has only to do with undocumented immigrants. Well, you would be very, very wrong. Very wrong. Because there are millions of American citizens who were born in this country. Their fathers and mothers and grandmothers and so on were born in this country who don't have proof of citizenship. I've dealt with many of them in my law practice. So this executive order could block millions of eligible voters from simply registering to vote. And it would impact especially black voters, senior voters, women voters, low-income voters, especially those kinds of groups. So that's why on April 3rd, 2025, 19 states and civil rights groups sued Trump to stop this executive order. All right, now let me bring that up. I want you to see all of this. So here's the lawsuit, that they filed to block Trump's executive order. Let's read just a little bit of it here. They say in their complaint, the president's constitutional role in elections is limited to competing in them and enforcing election laws enacted by Congress. That's it. Run for election and execute the laws that Congress has enacted. Nonetheless, on March 25th, 2025, Defendant President Donald J. Trump issued Executive Order Number 14248, entitled Preserving and Protecting the Integrity of American Elections EO, to transform how federal elections are conducted throughout the nation. The United States Constitution is clear about the power to regulate elections. As the sovereigns closest to the people, the states have preliminary or primary responsibility. As Madison explained at the Virginia Constitution, quote, it was found necessary to leave the regulation of federal elections in the first place to the state governments as being best acquainted with the situation of the people. Under the Election Clause, Congress may preempt state election law for federal contests, but nowhere does the Constitution provide the president or the executive branch with independent power to modify the state's procedures for conducting federal elections. And so they go on and on with that. And they point out that his executive order would create chaos in elections. All right. So they followed that up with a motion to ask the judge for an injunction. They filed it on May 5th, 2025. In addition to filing the complaint, they said, Judge, we need you to put a stop to this executive order immediately. We often do that in litigation. We filed a complaint, but sometimes we need immediate relief. We can't wait until the case is decided a year or two later. We need something done immediately. So they filed a motion for preliminary injunction. Okay? And the judge agreed. On June 13th, 2025, Judge Denise Casper granted their request for a preliminary injunction. Now here is the state's motion for preliminary injunction. Let's read a little bit of it, and then we'll get to the judge's order granting the injunction. So they said, as described in plaintiff's state's accompanying memorandum in support of this motion, preliminary injunctive relief is warranted because the executive order, the EO, constitutes an unprecedented attempt by the president to usurp power over federal elections that rightfully belongs to and has been exercised by the states and Congress. First, plaintiff states are likely to succeed on the merits of these claims. Specifically, they are likely to prevail in showing, and then they list the specific sections of Trump's executive order that they believe violate the Constitution. All right. Section 2A, Section 3D, Section 2A, 2D, 3D, Section 7A, Section 7A, and 7B. So they specifically named the parts of Trump's executive order that they believe are unconstitutional. All right, so the judge granted their motion, all right, and she issued a preliminary injunction. So if we jump down here, she says, accordingly, the court hereby allows plaintiff state's motion for preliminary injunction, D75, in defendants, their officers, agents, servants, and employees other than the president are enjoined from implementing Section 2A and all those sections that were named in the state's application for the injunction. So she named these specific sections that violated the Constitution. All right. So Trump was not able to exercise that executive order across the nation. Now, the judge wrote in her memorandum and order, let me show you something very interesting. So if we go to the very bottom of it, in a footnote, the judge said, the court's injunction as to sections 2A, 2D, 3D applies as to all states, but it is neither nationwide nor universal. It is a remedy tailored to the irreparable harm that plaintiffs in these consolidated cases would suffer in the absence of an injunction. To the extent the court's injunction advantages non-parties that benefit merely incidental. So essentially, she's saying here that her order granting the preliminary injunction is not a nationwide or universal injunction, but it does apply to all states. Now, that is going to be interesting because this case is going to end up in front of SCOTUS. And SCOTUS said that lower courts cannot issue nationwide or universal injunctions. This judge wisely said, that's not what this is. This applies to all states, but it is not nationwide or universal. So we got to see how SCOTUS ultimately will handle this. And of course, we first got to see if the judge grants their modification. All right, so that's precisely what the Trump administration did. Soon as this CASA case was handed down, which was just a week or so ago, on July 3rd, they filed a motion to modify Judge Casper's injunction. Because in their mind, since it applies to all states, it is a nationwide universal injunction. So let's read a little bit of what they say here. This is the Trump administration. They cite the infamous case, Trump v. CASA. In Trump v. CASA, Inc., the Supreme Court held that federal courts lack the power to issue universal injunctions. They must issue injunctions no broader than necessary to provide complete relief to each plaintiff with standing to sue. While courts may administer complete relief between the parties, complete relief is not synonymous with universal relief. Because this court's preliminary injunction prohibiting defendants from implementing Executive Order 14248, Sections 2D, is broader than necessary to provide complete relief to the plaintiffs in this case. The court should grant this motion and modify its injunction concerning Section 2D to the plaintiffs. And so they're saying this is, in fact, a universal, nationwide injunction, despite what the judge says. Therefore, they're saying to the judge, you got to change this because of the Trump v. CASA birthright citizenship / universal nationwide injunctions case. So the Trump administration is trying already to use this case to change circumstances on the ground prior to the 2026 midterms. So, as I told you, this case, the Trump v. Casa case, the birthright citizenship case, is not limited to immigration, deportations. That case, that holding, unleashed Trump to do almost anything, even if it's unlawful, illegal, and so on. And do not forget, don't forget that they had already given him absolute immunity for official acts. So this Trump v. Casa case just piles on more protection and more power to Trump to do whatever he pleases. And not just with immigration. This executive order, let's look at it. This is about elections, not immigration. And it's about voting. And it's really Trump's way of getting the SAVE Act passed as law. Not enacted by Congress, but still with this Trump v. Casa case, he still would be able to enforce it as if it had been passed or enacted by Congress. Because again, no federal judge can issue the nationwide injunction to stop it in the other 31 states. So in those states, those other 31 states, folks would have to show birth certificate and those other things, passports, in order to simply register to vote. That is always the way the GOP plays the voting game. They want less people voting, not more, because the more people vote, they lose. So they work hard to suppress votes, especially of certain people. Are you with me? So, the Trump v. Casa case is a horrible case. And it unleashed Trump. And it is the reason why attorneys, legal scholars, historians, politicians all over the country are alarmed at where our nation is. Our nation has taken a giant step toward authoritarianism, toward fascism, toward an autocracy. And it looks like the Supreme Court is an enabler and is helping it happen. So no wonder Trump has been very patient and polite with SCOTUS. Makes you think that he knew all the time they were on board. In fact, we know several of them are on board with him because he put 3 on the court. And 2 have been involved in, at least tangentially involved, in the January 6th insurrection. Or at least have expressed support for the things that Trump tried to get done on January 6th. So, it is the reason why I spent so much time last year, prior to the election, doing everything I could possibly do to warn African American people and anybody who would listen. Let's not return Donald John Trump to the White House, because he showed us in his first term where his heart is in terms of wanting to just have complete authority and power over this nation. which is in contradiction to the United States Constitution. And as I showed you in a previous video, the last video, it's also in contradiction to the Declaration of Independence. But enough people didn't listen, and over 2 million black people voted for this. And now Trump is targeting his ire, his anger toward our community primarily. And there's a whole lot more to come. And who in the world do you think this executive order is going to impact the most? It'll be black people. But we still can fight, folks. We still can fight. The midterm is 1.5 years away, a little less than 1.5 years. Get whatever documents you got to get. Get whatever documents, wherever you were born, get that birth certificate. Get your passport. Get it. You got a long time to get it. So get it and get registered. And let's vote this man. We can't vote him out of office in 2026, but we can vote him out of power in the sense of taking back Congress, who then can check at least one branch, checking all that he's doing, all the anti-black, anti-democracy, anti-civil rights stuff that he's doing. All right, I'm Reverend and Civil Rights Attorney Augustus Corbett. Thank you for watching this video, and stay woke.